Welcome to another episode of It Has to Be Said. I'm Rachel French, and I'll go ahead and say it. If you are getting ready to give a public speech of any kind, you are probably not going to prepare the right way. Most people don't, which means not only will you probably not be as effective as you want to be, but it's possible that you'll be counterproductive. I can help with this. Now, the way I approach public speaking and preparing what you're going to say is a little bit different than anything I've seen other people do. So I hope you'll find this helpful. I could go a lot deeper on a lot of these points. So if there's something I touch on that you would actually like me to go deeper on, leave a comment and I'll plan another video where I can talk about it more in depth. Recently, a friend was speaking at a city council meeting for the very first time and asked me to look at her script, and we talked about it and what she was trying to get done. And it just got me to thinking about all the times I've spoken at county supervisors meetings and at city council meetings. And you may or may not know this, but I've been doing public speaking in one way or another for decades, including as a paid speaker. So I may not be perfect. There's always room to improve, but there are a lot of things I know to do that really help you be effective. So I'm going to give you 5 things that you absolutely must do, a few of which you've probably never even heard of before. And at the end, I'll share with you a few things that you really should not do. Again, things that folks don't really talk about that much, but that are super duper important. So the first thing you absolutely must do before you speak is you need to decide on your thesis. So I know your mind just went back to high school and you're thinking thesis statement, the point I want to prove. No. Wrong. A thesis statement is not the point you want to prove. And when I was an English teacher in high school, I had my own definition of thesis, and it's the one I had my students say over and over again, and it's the one I want you to have in mind before you give a speech or a presentation of any kind. A thesis is what you want your audience to think, believe, or do when they're done listening to you that they probably weren't going to think, believe, or do, or not as easily, before they heard you speak. So let me say that again. When you give a presentation, the first thing you have to decide is, what do I want my listener, my audience, to think, believe, or do as a result of what I'm going to say? And be careful about who your audience is, because if you go to a city council meeting, there is a temptation to speak to the crowd behind you. I know that I've been to city council meetings where I've said something that was not in alignment with what the majority of people in the room liked. And I had to put that feeling aside because my audience was the 5 city council members who were going to make a decision. And I was trying to impact their decision-making process. I wanted them to do what I wanted them to do. Now, we had an issue here in my neighborhood a few years back, and I had several meetings in a row where I had the opportunity to go and speak to the city council. And I actually had a slightly different thesis statement every time. Now, overall, I wanted them to vote no on something, but I knew that I could break that up into little pieces, because if I only had 30 seconds or a minute, which is what we often had when a big crowd would show up, then I knew I needed to be very focused and specific. So what I wanted them to do overall, of course, was vote no on this big development project. But what did I want them to think or believe or do immediately after my little 30 seconds or 1 minute, especially as it fit into the rest of the speeches that were going to be given by my neighbors and fellow residents? Well, that I was laser focused on. So I'll explain more about that after I say what point number 2 is. But you can't think global and big about what you want your audience to do, especially if you're talking about speaking in a forum like a city council meeting, or if you're giving a sales presentation, for example. If you're in sales, then you have to be specific about, yes, overall you want them to buy, but do you want them to buy immediately after this presentation? Or do you want them simply to schedule a follow-up call or a demo? Or do you want them to ask more questions? Or do you want them to connect you with someone higher up? Overall, you want to make some money, but what do you want the person you're talking to right now to think, believe, or do when you're done talking to them? So get crystal clear on that. And then, even before you start to put down your talking points, I mean, you can put down your talking points anytime you want, but the second thing you should do that people don't really talk about very often is you need to think about the appeals that you're going to use. Okay, so there are three appeals that are used in persuasive writing and speaking: logos, pathos, and ethos. Does that sound familiar? Logos is using logic to make your argument. Pathos is using emotion to make your argument. And ethos is using your own credibility to make your argument. Now, you're going to do a combination and use a combination of these appeals, of course. Ethos. Okay, let's use the city council meeting as an example. I'll keep going back to this because I think that this might be the most useful for some of you who are listening. So your ethos is probably your credibility. The reason why you should be listened to, the reason why you have a right to speak on this topic, is that you are a resident, you are a constituent, you are a taxpayer, you live in the neighborhood. But if you have additional criteria, experience, knowledge that gives you additional ethos, like an additional reason why your opinion should be weighed out higher than anyone else's, then you should mention that. Education, you've lived in the neighborhood for 50 years and so did your parents and grandparents. You had experience with this situation in another community. Whatever it is you have that's personal, that can elevate your credibility, then you should mention that. You don't build an entire presentation on it, but it's good to mention it. Okay, so that's ethos. Logos. You're going to lay out facts and logic. Of course you are. Not everyone does. Some people go right to pathos, but I'll talk about that in a second. When it comes to logos, you need to have some talking points that are logical, because when you're speaking to a group of 5 or 7 people, some people on that board are going to be listening to you, in a logical way. So you want to appeal to them. Some of them are going to be more heart-centered and relationship-centered people, and you want to appeal to them emotionally as well. But you should, of course, always have something logical to back up your argument. Now, pathos, this is the tricky one. It's not what you think. When you're appealing to emotion, it doesn't have anything to do with your emotion. It has to do with the emotion you want your listener to experience. Not through you. Nobody cares how you feel. You might think people care how you feel, but they don't. They care how they feel, right? So a lot of the videos that go viral that come from city council meetings are these people giving these terribly impassioned speeches, and they're sort of being dramatic, or they're telling really sad stories, awful things that happen to them or to their family or to their children or to their business. And these are rare, though. You might think that your experience is incredibly powerful, but just because you feel a feeling strongly doesn't mean that that translates into getting someone else to feel something. So if all you want is for the people on the city council to feel sorry for you, if that is the appeal, you want them to feel sorry, okay, that's valid. But that alone probably will not get them to do what you want them to do. What do you want them to feel? So in the situation that I alluded to a moment ago, which is where we had a development project that was going to be put into our neighborhood, and we had several meetings where we could go and address the city council, I would decide at each meeting what I wanted the city council members to feel. I laid out logic every time, but each time I decided what I wanted them to feel, because if I could get them to feel something or think something, then I could get them to do the thing that I wanted them to do. Maybe not right after that meeting, but eventually. So let me give you some examples. So one time I remember that my appeal was to try to get them to feel empowered to be brave. I wanted them to feel brave and courageous. I was asking them to not make a decision about this development project until they had put pressure on other cities in Orange County to also invest in development projects that were similar. So in that case, I appealed to their sense of ego, and I told them that we trusted them and that we needed them and that we knew that they had the courage to do something hard, which was not take action until other cities took action. That was what I wanted them to feel. I wanted them to feel brave and empowered and trusted by us, because I was asking them to do something difficult, which was not vote no on the project, but just wait and then put pressure on other cities. One time, though, I went and I wanted them to feel kind of outraged. I wanted them to know that we were mad, that we were tired of being ignored. I wanted them to feel a little bit guilty. I wanted them to question whether they'd been approaching us the right way, whether they'd been hearing us, whether they'd been demonstrating to us that they knew they worked for us, or they thought it was the other way around. See, so each time I spoke, I had some logical facts that I laid out, but I knew how I wanted them to feel. I knew what I wanted them to think and do and believe at the end of each of my presentations that I hoped over time would result in their making the decision I wanted them to make, which was to vote something down. Now, what I noticed about my neighbors was that they often just went and sort of raged against the machine. They just went and complained. So in that situation, when you've got a resident who's just complaining or attacking, how does a city council member feel? Do they feel empowered? Do they feel compassion for you? Do they want to make you happy? Do they feel responsible because you gave them a vote and they want to represent you well? No. When you just complain and attack, they feel defensive. So if you want a city council member or your mayor or your board of supervisors to feel defensive, that's fine. But are they going to do what you want them to do as a result of feeling defensive? No, probably not. And you might get up there and tell your sad story and you might cry, and it might be a truly compelling story about hardship on you and your family and your kids and your business and your livelihood. It might be truly compelling and sad. It might make them feel sad. But if all they feel is sorry for you, if all they feel is sad for you, is that enough to get them to make a difficult financial or political decision? I don't know. That's a risk you have to take. So what I want you to think about is number one, what do you want your audience to think, believe, or do after they hear you speak? And how do you want them to feel as a result of what you said? After you've laid out your ethos, your credibility, why they should hear you out, your logos, your logic and facts that they should consider and weigh. But how do you want them to feel? What emotion do you want them to feel? Even if it doesn't happen here, even if it happens up here in the head, what do you want them to feel? Be very careful, because a string of angry citizens just makes people with ego often feel defensive and defiant. It often makes them want to dig in their heels. So you have to come at them from a lot of different directions. And if that makes your neighbors mad, that's too bad. You have to decide what's going to be persuasive and effective in getting what you want. Okay, so number one, what do you want them to think, believe, or do? Number two, how do you want them to feel? Number three, what are the key points you're going to lay out? You should write down all the things that you want to say in order from most important to least important. Now, whether you're going to script out and read your presentation, your little speech, or you're going to speak from talking points, make sure that you lay things out in order from top to bottom. There are two really good reasons why you should go from most important to least important. The first reason is that unless you're a professional actor and you can build suspense and you can maintain and hold the attention of your audience until you get to the really good stuff, there's a chance that they're going to tune out way before you get to the most important thing. So don't bury the lead. Start with the most important stuff up top, okay? The second reason, actually, this is a two-part reason. The second reason why you should start with the most important stuff and go down is because even if you've practiced a lot, you may run out of time and you may find that you can't get to all of your points, and you want to make sure that you got to the most important stuff first. Because sometimes you're feeling a little adrenaline and you're feeling a little distracted and you're feeling a little pressure, and you might end up going off on some tangents or saying things taking a little longer than you had intended, and then you'll run out of time and then you aren't getting to the most important stuff. So start with the most important stuff. And the third reason why you would want to start with the most important thing is because sometimes you'll get to a meeting, like a city council meeting, and you'll find that even though you were promised 5 minutes or 3 minutes, for whatever reason, they've cut you down to 1 minute. And you don't want to have to reorder your thoughts and reorder your speech. You just want to cut from the bottom. And this happens all the time, especially when there's a topic that your elected officials don't really want to hear from the neighborhood about. And especially if a lot of people have showed up to talk about it, they're going to cut your time and they're going to give you no notice and no chance to practice or reorganize your thoughts. So start from the top and move your way to the bottom. And that way, if you have to cut, you're cutting the least important stuff. Okay, that's number three. Number four is you need to practice. I don't care how good a public speaker you are, everybody is a better speaker when they practice. One thing that people have said to me for many years is, oh my goodness, it's amazing how good a speaker you are without even preparing. And I just laugh because they don't know that even if I'm just going to give a 30-second introduction to me and my business at a networking meeting, what they don't know is that I've already done it 20 times in a row in the car on the way there. You should always practice. Even if you're going to read, you should practice. And one reason is because, well, it takes about 100 muscles to speak. And that's not even including your hands and holding your paper and your eyes and your body language. That's just 100 muscles to speak. And so like anything else, I mean, if you're going to practice free throws, you need to throw a bunch of free throws. And if you're going to say something, it's helpful if you've already said it before, because your muscles will actually have that memory and you will remember. You'll be creating these neural pathways. You've already said this thing 5 times. And so when you go to say it again, it comes out very naturally. I actually hope that you can't tell which parts of this presentation I have said out loud multiple times, and those I've just said many times in the past. And so there's old muscle memory. But whether you're going to read or you're going to just speak from talking points, and I recommend speaking from talking points if you can, practice a little bit, especially transitions, and especially the beginning and end. So beginning, end, and transitions, all right? So practice, and make sure that you can get it done in the amount of time you have. That's very, very important because, as you know, at council meetings, they're just going to turn off your mic. So you can't afford to run out of time. And you're going to need to make sure that your ending is in there. And so that's actually number 5. So 3 is put your key points in order from most important to least important. Number 4 is practice that. And then number 5 is, I call it packing a punch. And what I mean by that is at the end of your speech, whether it was 30 seconds or 30 minutes, tell them what you want them to do. Go ahead and insult their intelligence. You might think it's very, very obvious, the point that you're trying to make, because you've talked about this, you've talked about that, and you've laid out some logical facts, and you've complained about this, and you've appealed to their sense of ego and whatever, and then you think it's really clear what you want them to do. But the most important thing here at the end is to leave them remembering what it is you want, giving them a call to action. Salespeople know what a call to action is. They do it at the end of a sales call. Teachers know what a call to action is because the lesson often leads to a project or a homework assignment or next steps. Well, same thing here. When you're trying to be persuasive, you want to tell them what you want them to do, but you also need to remind them why you just said all the things you said. If you want them to feel compassion for a neighborhood, then say, as a result of everything I've been saying, you should be feeling compassion for these people. And because of that, you should be voting no or voting yes or taking this next step. Or if you want them to feel brave, then at the end, you should say, as I've said already, you are people of courage. Please do the right thing and vote no. Do you understand? Whatever it is you want them to think, believe, or do, remind them of it, but also remind them about what it is you were trying to get them to feel so that they will make that connection. And keep in mind that a lot of people, they're just looking at you politely, but they're not hearing you at all. In fact, right now, some of you who are going to listen to this entire podcast episode, you are multitasking and your mind is wandering. But when I get to the end, you're going to listen to me. There's just something about that. Our attention tends to go in and out, in and out. And same thing with these elected officials. Their attention is going in and out, in and out. So at the end, make sure that you remind them why you said what you said and remind them what it is you want them to do and why they should absolutely feel compelled to do it as a result of everything you've shared. So again, the 5 things that you absolutely must do. Number 1, decide what it is you want your audience to think, believe, or do. Number 2, decide how you're going to appeal to them through your ethos, logos, and pathos. Again, the emotion you want them to experience. Number 3, write down your key points in order from most important to least important. Number 4, practice, 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 and make sure that you can fit everything you have to say into your time constraints. Number 5, pack a punch at the end by reminding your audience what you want them to do and why it is they should feel compelled to do it. Remember, attached to the feeling that you made them feel while you were speaking. All right. So before I give you the last two or three things that you absolutely must not do, I just want to say that I hope this has been helpful. And if it has been helpful, please be sure to share this, leave a comment if you're on YouTube, Rumble, or Facebook, and follow me wherever you watch your podcast. Subscribe, download, leave me a rating, even if it's not a great rating. 4 or 5 stars would be great, but that will help me find a new audience as I'm gaining traction and getting this podcast and video series off the ground. I'd really appreciate it. And I definitely already am so grateful for the support that I've been getting, not only from friends, but from strangers. It all means a lot. Okay, so here's the bonus. Things you absolutely must not do. You absolutely, number one, you must not wing it. No matter how good a speaker you are, no matter how many times you have gotten up without preparation and been brilliant, don't wing it. I'm pretty good at winging it, and I don't do it. Not unless I'm someplace and someone says, our speaker didn't show up, can you get up for a second and talk? Yeah, that's different. But if you have a chance to prepare, you should prepare. The second thing that you absolutely must not do, let's say you're not prepared, or let's say you don't feel very prepared, or let's say you're just not feeling that confident, or let's say you don't feel that you really have that much of a right to speak. Never, ever, ever at any point should you admit any of that. Never say, well, I'm not really prepared, so I'm just going to give you my thoughts. As soon as you say that, 99% of people stop listening. If you didn't care enough to get ready to present to me, then why should I listen to you? You didn't show any effort, so I'm not going to show any effort either. People will automatically tune you out, and worse than that, they'll think badly about you. So next time you get up to speak, they might be remembering, oh, that's the dude who stood up and took up my time for 3 minutes and said that he was just winging it. Never, ever, ever apologize for not being prepared, or admit that you're not prepared, or say, maybe I don't have a right to be talking about this, but I'm just going to talk about it anyway. Don't do that. As soon as you say, maybe you shouldn't listen to me, they won't. Okay? And the third thing that you absolutely must not do is expect some sort of euphoria or feeling of accomplishment when you're done speaking. And what I mean by that, just hear me out. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer or anything. But when you speak about something that matters to you, you're going to have some adrenaline surge. It's just what's going to happen. Even the most practiced, comfortable speakers, they feel some endorphins and some adrenaline because you're performing. And so that's just natural. And so what happens afterward is that you're going to feel a little bit of a letdown. Especially when you are speaking somewhere like a city council meeting, they're going to look at you blank-faced if they look at you at all. Some of them are going to be looking down at their phones and being purposefully rude. But even those who are listening, they're just going to look at you without any expression whatsoever. They're not going to engage with you probably. You are lucky if you get a head nod or a smile or a chuckle. You're lucky if you get that. And when you're done, they're just going to say, thank you, next person. And they'll say that person's name, and you'll go sit down and you'll think, oh, that was terrible. You'll start to judge yourself. You'll realize that you left something out, or that you wanted to say something a little bit differently, or whatever the case may be. You're going to start to feel a little bit funny about how you presented. And you're also going to wonder, was it worth it? Did I have an effect? Did I have any kind of impact? Or did I just go through all of that for nothing? I remember the first time I spoke for money. Someone wrote me a pretty good check, and I went and got on stage and spoke to a room full of people. And I remember later, I felt good for about an hour afterward. And then later that day, I felt something akin to depression. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I feel depressed? I got paid to do something I love. I think I did a good job. I was really well prepared. It was well received. But now I just feel really down. Why do I feel so down? And I was lucky that I was able to tell a friend this, who is also a speaker. And he said, yeah, that's the adrenaline crash. It's normal. Don't worry about it. He said, you'll probably feel a little bit down tomorrow too, but it'll pass. And he said, you did a great job. Don't worry about it. He said, the way you felt during the first hour after it was over, that's how you should feel, and just let this down feeling go. So I reminded my friend of this the other day. I said, don't worry if you feel a little bit down or you question yourself after you speak at the city council meeting, because it's just normal that after you've had an adrenaline spike, you're going to have an adrenaline crash. It's a hormonal thing. It's a biological and physiological thing, and it's normal. So just don't give it too much attention and don't worry about it. It doesn't really mean anything. Okay. Always go speak when you are impassioned about something, when you feel committed about something, because not enough people do. It's the number one fear that people have is public speaking, and it keeps them from doing it. And we really need more voices right now, not fewer voices. And if you have a business, you need to do more sales, not less. And if there's stuff that needs to be said, then you need to say it, right? That's why I named this podcast what I did. It has to be said. I get nervous sometimes before I have to talk in front of anyone, even alone to my phone or my computer. But if something has to be said, then say it. And these tips will really help you prepare and feel confident and calm and help you be a lot more effective than you would be otherwise. I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, please share, and I'll see you next time.